Welcome back. With me in the studio is Honorable Benny Lab. It's a delight to have you on Correro.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Well, Honorable, let's begin the conversation. But first, let's say happy International Girls Child Day, because every woman will say, no matter the age limit, say I'm still a girl.
Oh yes, we're always girls. Even if you're 90, you still remain young girls.
So, but then there is this issues of concern. First, the Child Rights Act that was passed over 2 decades ago, 20 years plus. Right? But in reality, has it truly changed the lives of Nigerian children?
Well, thank you very much for bringing this topic to the forefront and to the front burner of national discussion. Very often we do not get, our nation doesn't discuss enough about our children, who are our greatest asset. The Child Rights Act was passed in 2003 by the National Assembly, following the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. The Child Rights Act stipulates that children must be protected by governments and by society, communities in which children live, from abuse, from exploitation, from neglect. It also talks about issues that relate to the right to life, right to liberty, right to freedom of association, and for their opinions also to be heard. I'm glad in Nigeria we do have a children's parliament. How functional that parliament is, I don't know, but the nation should also learn to listen to its children. So this Child Rights Act was passed as a result of the need for children to participate fully in the life in their own growth and in the growth of the society. We know that children, of course, by virtue of the fact that they're children, they're the most vulnerable in any society. And that was why when I was in the National Assembly, I proposed the Child Protection Act, Agency Act, to be passed and to be enforced and to implement the provisions of the Child Rights Act. Now, your question asks, why isn't it being implemented? Unfortunately, the mechanism for implementing the Child Rights Act, according to the Act itself, is just the committee. There's a committee going by the current Child Rights Act that is sits under the Ministry of Women Affairs, and the committee consists of a few stakeholders in different agencies of government and federal women's groups and so on and so forth, like the NCWS. Unfortunately, we don't know how effective that committee is, but by virtue of the fact that it's a committee, you can see that there's already a challenge in the implementation. And when I chaired the Committee on Women Affairs, I advocated very seriously and I brought to the floor the the Child Protection and Enforcement Agency Act. Unfortunately, that act wasn't passed because there were objections, because some of our colleagues believed that the Child Rights Act should be repealed. And I was very, very shocked. According to them, the age of marriage, a child is defined under the Nigerian Constitution as anyone under the age of 18. And according to them, the age of a child, because by virtue of some beliefs, if you're already married, then you're no longer a child, regardless of your age. And of course, part of the provisions of the Child Rights Act is also criminalizes child marriage. And some people do not believe that that should be done. So there's a conflict of laws and conflict of
interest,
of consensus and interest on the issue of the age of the child. And so that has been a major challenge to the implementation of the Child Rights Act.
So as it stands right now, in reality, nothing has changed, even in terms of the implementation and
no, certain parts are being implemented, and more states have domesticated it. I believe about over 20 states have now domesticated it, but some of the states did not mention the age of the child. However, the good thing about it is the Act does stipulate that every child of primary school age must have free education, and the universal basic education is compulsory for all children of primary school age.
But Honorable, speaking of domestication of this act, even in states, some states still find this very strange. in terms of looking at the generality of the act. The Child Right Act, for one would think that at this point, every Nigerian child should count. Some states still find it very difficult to even want to come to terms with the whole act. In a situation of this magnitude, can we say that the National Assembly have done enough in terms of compelling the state to implement this act?
Well, first of all, I think what should be done is there has to be, like I told you, there's already a conflict of interest. So I think there needs to be a consensus on certain parts of the act, not all the portions. The right to life, right to health care, right to protection, right to education, all those are non-contentious issues. So most of the act, at least about 80%, is not contended. Is not contended. So I think the issue is for the National Assembly to strengthen oversight, but most importantly for the implementing agencies, for instance, the health ministry. How much of health care, how much do children enjoy free health care in Nigeria, especially under the age of 18? Can a child walk into a primary health care clinic and be sure that he's going to be treated? Will the drugs be available? Will the doctors and nurses be on hand to take care of that child? Its implementation is wide. It's not just one arm of government. The society itself also needs to go back. The communities must function at the community level. Okay, most communities right now, children have the number of children, youth, 18 and under children. They're higher in population because Nigeria is it's one of the countries that's growing very rapidly. Our population is growing at a very fast pace. So first we need to ask children between 1 to 5, we need to plan for them. The issue of infant and maternal care comes in. When a mother goes to give birth, what facilities is available to her? Does the child have a right to survival? I mean, the child does have a right to survival, but is the child likely to survive under the harsh conditions in the rural areas? For instance, Nigeria has the second or third highest rate of maternal mortality, where women die at childbirth, and infant mortality, where children between the ages of 1 to 5 lose their lives. And yet, the Child Rights Act stipulates and says a child has a right to survival, and government must do everything to ensure a child must survive. So I think the various government agencies, there needs to be a synergy with the Ministry of Women Affairs, which is saddled with issues of childcare, to come together with healthcare, with education, and with all the relevant agencies to see what they could do to protect the lives of our children. I mean, to protect the welfare of our children. And of course, the lives of our children, security-wise. That's another issue altogether.
Well, Honorable, the number of out-of-school children right now, it's becoming very alarming. The number of street hawking kids in Nigeria is also getting out of hand. Look at the issue around child labor in general. And we are still talking about implementation in 2025. At this point in time, is the government really serious about all of its policies? Looking at things that try to access it, just opposite and in reality right now. Talking about number of out-of-school children, number of children that are we really serious as a people? Let's not even go to the government in order to ensure that the Nigerian child is safe and the right of a child is being upheld.
Well, first of all, let's start from the family. The Child Rights Act stipulates that families, a child has a right to be put in a family, and the family should have an obligation to carry out its responsibilities towards the child. And the first is that of education. So families are supposed to educate their children, no matter how many they are in number. You have to realize that some families have more children than other families. Some families may have 2, 3, 4 children. Others may have 5, 10, 15, even 20 children. But all these children have a right to education, and not just any education, but good education that will develop their potentials and their abilities. So while the family has to work on educating their children, yes, government should provide the resources, but you have to go first to the local governments We have 774 local governments in Nigeria. What are they doing about primary health care in their local government? I think every Nigerian should go back to their schools in their local governments. And then I think it's very important that in our local governments, the councillors that are elected, the representatives elected at the local government level, and the chairman of the local government ensure that no child is out of school during school hours while school is in session. It is actually illegal, but most of the time it's not implemented. And funny enough, some people will go on the streets and be buying from children at that time. If you're going in a transport vehicle and you see a child selling when that child is supposed to be in school, I think you should report to the nearest police station. Why is a 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old child selling groundnuts or banana on the streets when they're supposed to be in school during school hours?
Honorable Aisha, we are ready for that conversation.
We should. Why not? Because that is child abuse. And that's the highest form of, that's where child exploitation comes from. And talk about child labor. A child who is supposed to be in a conducive learning environment to become productive in the society is being exploited for peanuts. It was very sad when an elderly person told me that somebody close to her when they were growing up was a victim of child abuse. First of all, they were made to hawk, and from there they married them off. And that lady, in the end, she was never herself because she was exploited. Exploitation sometimes happens by parents and guardians because they feel they want the immediate benefits. And I think we in the society must stop it. Any child that is out of school and the parents know that child is out of school, I think it's time that we start to hold those parents accountable. Then that way all of our children will be educated. And that's why we have the issue of insecurity as well. Because a lot of it starts from childhood. A lot of those who participate in these heinous crimes did not stay in school to know that they can learn a trade and become useful to themselves. Rather, they were exploited during their childhood, and they grow up, sometimes they're used by these criminals to commit crimes. And from there, they themselves become criminals. So I think it's very important that we tackle the issue of child exploitation, child labor, and child trafficking.
All right, so let's look at the Nigerian constitution, which is the grand norm. A lot of, there was a debate where most members of the House of National Assembly at that point were saying, hey, there is a contradiction between this section of the Nigerian constitution, which you've mentioned rightly, that it is the right to age and all of that. But then let's talk about all of that section, looking at the Child Rights Act and early marriage, which most senators have tried to give their own verdict and interpretation to that particular section of the Constitution, and say, of course, when you're marriageable, if you're of marriageable age, of course, you tying it up. Now, let's look at that. Does this still hold water even in our current realities?
Well, I think as society grows and develops, I think people are knowing the value of education, especially of the girl child, more. And I think more and more, you find out that more and more of the more and more children who are female are being sent to school along with the male. I think society knows the value. The issue now is that of insecurity. I think insecurity is more of a threat now because certain communities don't even want to send the girl child to school because they may get kidnapped and they may never come home. And so they keep them at home. So what are we doing to tackle insecurity? The issue of the age of marriage still remains an issue, but I believe is not as it was in the past because of enlightenment. Most of that enlightenment will have to come from traditional rulers, religious leaders. It will have to come from the grassroots, so to speak, because you can sit down and legislate all you want, and if the communities don't believe, they're not on the same page with you, regardless of what the laws say, nobody's going to do it. So that mindset and that consensus that, look, let us educate the girl child. A girl who is educated is empowered. She could be the doctor to treat that whole community tomorrow. She could be the teacher and professor that will come and teach them and set up schools and be a lecturer. She could be a lawyer, she could be an engineer, she could be an architect, build housing, and so let them know the value of education. I believe that is very important. But like I said, to me, the greatest threat now to the girl child is insecurity.
So let's talk about the whole right of a child in Nigeria. One major obstacle that has tend to make people not to even know about all of this, and the level of awareness and is low. Now, one obstacle that we've been able to identify is the issues around our culture and religion. Now, in this particular instance, if a right of a child law act has been passed and it's at variance with the people's beliefs, their religion, and what they hold, in such a situation, how do we address these concerns? Because this is one of the limitations, one of the obstacles that is even facing the entire Child Rights Act in Nigeria.
Well, unfortunately, you can't change people's religious beliefs. That's very difficult to do, especially in Nigeria. So the way I remember we went around it was that, okay, pass this act and leave out the age of marriage so that the other benefits of the Child Rights Act will come to the child, regardless of where that child is. But if you insist in some cases, however, like I said, traditional and religious leaders have to come together and think of what's best for their children. And some communities have done it. And if you look at the example, international best practices, countries around the world, most countries, in fact, like I said, the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, signed by many, many countries, almost, most of the countries of the world. And they accept the fact that the age of a child should be 18. So I think Nigeria should catch on to that.
There is speculations that a lot of campaigns to promote the right of a child in Nigeria is still urban-centric. But when we look at it in general, are people from rural community, are they being enlightened in practical terms about their right as a child?
Well, unfortunately, believe it or not, even the urban-centric, they don't know enough of their rights. Because, yes, while the children in the urban centers are getting more resources and more access to resources, they still need to know that there are certain rights and responsibilities that they have. I think the chairman, the councillors, the legislative arms of the local governments and the 774 local governments, these are issues that should be discussed at ALGON meetings when they go for their ALGON, which is the Association of Local Government Chairmen. Yeah. Yes, I think these are issues that should come up. What's going on with our children? Those in the south, in the east, in the west, north central, wherever. How are children being treated and what are the lessons to learn? They
outgone that their children don't even attend public schools. Most chairmen and councillors, their children don't attend public schools.
Yes,
they don't even know what some of these rural dwellers, what they go through. Would only come, sometimes they are being said that they only come to rural communities when they want to campaign for elections. In such a situation of this magnitude, how best can we begin to address these concerns? Because it affects rural dwellers.
Well, I think rural dwellers themselves need to, stand up and form associations and say, look, we need better schools, and vote in, people who they believe will respond. When I was in the National Assembly, I visited many schools. In fact, I helped to intervene a lot, and I was visiting schools all the time. So I think it's the culture of the electorate. What is a priority to you? And that's why beforehand, before you elect the chairman of your local government, get a commitment from him on the issue of education, especially when it comes to children. And because when you get a commitment, believe it or not, it works. In my local government, there are certain things that there were certain commitments made, and the people kept reminding, oh, this is what you promised. And if you want to come back a certain, another tenure, you need to do ABC. So it works. Active participation of citizens in any democracy works. So citizens should always form themselves in a non-violent way and in a very respectful manner. Say, look, we just want to remind you of this promise. And I want you to know that you promised us A, B, C, D, and if you don't do this, we will not vote for you. That's all. And simply, that's why you have the ballot. That's the citizens' rights and a responsibility to vote for who you believe that will represent you well and carry out those actions that should be done.
Let's talk about the governmental agencies that are responsible for the child protection. First, are they underfunded? Secondly, are they poorly coordinated? Looking at that, because I'm asking this to ask, in a situation where we have government officials that fail to enforce child protection laws, we've seen it play out most times. We see sometimes, let's not even go through this path, right? But then, in being fair, how will you assess the government agencies responsible for child protection?
Well, first of all, I just told you that when I was in the assembly, I tried to get the Child Protection Enforcement Agency bill passed. Until you have an agency to enforce the rights to enforce the provisions of the Child Rights Act, unfortunately, we're not going to make much progress in assessing implementation or even in execution. The same thing happened at NAPTIP. I also chaired the Committee on Human Rights. So when the law was passed, I believe also in 2003, before I came to the Assembly, on the National Agency on the Prohibition of Trafficking in Persons, nothing was done until we passed and then amended the law on NAPTIP. To create NAPTIP. So if you have just the law, there was a law prohibiting trafficking in persons, but there was no commission. And it was in the same spirit that we also passed the Disability Commission. We also passed the bill to establish the Disability Commission. So I'm privileged that I chaired those two processes where the Disability Commission came into effect because it was needed, because if you had a disability bill, talking about the rights of the disabled, and there was no enforcement agency, it wasn't going to happen. The bill will simply be there and there'll be no agency to enforce it. So for the children, I see, I foresaw this happening. But like I said, at the time, my colleagues resisted it because they wanted the Child Rights Act even repealed. So until the National Assembly comes up with a Child Protection Enforcement Agency to enforce the rights of the child, the bill already has been written. It was even gazetted at one time in the National Assembly. I did that. So it's not going to be new. It's just for them to dust it. And if they believe in it, especially, hopefully, I would like to see the minister bring it as an executive bill to know that the government also supports it. Until an agency is established to enforce the rights of children in Nigeria, because most countries have it, not just advanced countries, here in Africa, because they realize how important the rights of a child. For instance, look at so many children. Children are abused, children are exploited, children are treated even as domestic slaves, and nothing happens. But that agency is responsible for the persecution of all offenders who violate the rights of children. So if that agency comes into being, that will be their job. And also to ensure that there are laws, policies, projects for the welfare of the child. Whatever it is to promote the welfare of the child, that will be their responsibility.
So, Honorable, what if I get you correctly?
Yes.
Until this agency comes into light, until this agency is created, we're still going to keep going in circles.
Yes.
So it's not that the agencies of government that we have right now that are in charge of are responsible for protection of children's rights. It's not that they are underfunded.
We don't have, you see, that's what I told you. We only have a committee. We only have a committee under the Women Affairs, Ministry of Women Affairs, to handle the rights of children. NAPTIP does trafficking generally, but it's general and it's not specific to children. But children, that's only in trafficking cases. And then, of course, the Human Rights Commission just you can advocate for the whole nation. regardless of who you are. But there's nothing specific to children. So I hope you can see that there is a need, because those are the international best practices. Even in Africa, many countries have a child protection agency. They just call it child protection agency. And that's very important. I visited the CPA in Canada, and when I saw the model, I said Nigeria should have a child protection agency. That was when I brought the bill. But unfortunately, my colleagues felt that they wanted to repeal the Child Rights Act. And that showed me that there was a disconnect. They did not understand the role of the importance of protecting children and, you know, helping them advance their own rights. They did not understand it.
Now, this is quite interesting, because when we look at the rate at which we have out-of-school children in Nigeria as it stands right now, we look at the number of children that are trafficked almost on a regular basis. We look at the number of children that are being enslaved. We look at the number of children that the entire process makes it look as, that's why we are having this overview of the child rights. If at all there is a right of the Nigerian child, if at all there is even an act of the Nigerian child, because when we look at the numbers, one would have thought that last year's number was very interesting, but the year before last, the numbers keep going up as against the reversal, which is supposed to be the obvious. But in this particular instance, let's even talk about this. Is enough being done to address malnutrition in Nigeria? Because most children, I'm telling you a practical experience. On Saturday, we went for, Saturday was the International Girls Child Day. And we went out for an event, and it was interesting, the kind of what we saw on the field, and practical. What we saw on the field, you see malnourished children, you see abuse, you see displaced persons. And I kept wondering if it's the same country that we are in. But when we look at all of this and put them together, are we really addressing the issues around, let's even begin from malnutrition?
Well, thank you for that question. In fact, just today, I attended a meeting with some of my former colleagues on the issue of nutrition of the Nigerian child, because I have a passion for that. I noticed that more and more children go to bed with no food. There's hunger generally. And I was privileged to be part of those who advocated for the Committee on Nutrition to be established in the House of Reps, and that was done by the Right Honorable Speaker Tajuddin Abbas, and I must thank him for that. Now, having said that, I believe that first on the issue of malnutrition, I want to recommend that you have Honorable Chike Okafor here in the studio, because that is exactly what he's dealing with now. Nigeria has the second or third highest rate. In fact, I hear we surpassed India. Nigeria and India they've been
they're competing. Yeah.
The highest number of malnourished children in the world. So we have a very high rate of malnourished children. And yes, unfortunately, it's getting worse. Before, it was mainly in the northeast, but now it's spreading to other parts of the nation, northwest, north central. But you can see all these are crisis areas. So the issue is the food, the insecurity is leading to a food crisis. That is the root cause. And I believe in going to tackling the root causes. Because if we just say feed them, which is what thankfully organizations like the World Bank and other international donors, even friends from Saudi Arabia, from time to time they donate food. But that is not a permanent or sustainable solution. Sustainable solution, number one, is to address the issues of insecurity. Farmers cannot farm. Children run away. They have their parents are killed, and they run away. They have nobody, no family to take care of them. They're supposed to have families to take. I know in my state, Plateau State, it's very disheartening for me to even go around my state now, because there's so many children. The number of children living with this crisis of hunger and malnutrition. I think Plateau State must be one of the highest, states. I don't know, but it's higher than what it used to be. And it's just one. All over the north, some parts of the south, and even where you don't expect it. So we do have that malnutrition crisis, and I'm glad the government has recognized that. And there's an initiative, I believe, under the office of the Vice President, where they're working with the World Bank to try to address the situation through the various state governments. And I believe the state governments have keyed into it. But I believe that until we solve the issue of insecurity, simply giving out food or, you know, supplementing with temporary nutritional food support is just on a temporary basis. You can give me bags of corn and bags of rice today, or rice meals and corn meals, and I'll eat it. And so what happens to my tomorrow, my future? So I think until we go back where farmers are able to farm, you know, the parents are able to earn a living, and families are able to live in their communities without being displaced. The issue of displacement is pervasive in Nigeria, all over the north. We face those issues of displacement. So, of course, who are the victims are the children. Children, number one, they're the most vulnerable population, and then women. So unfortunately, that's what we're seeing today.
So invariably, we're not even doing enough to address this concerns, because the numbers keep rising and it's disturbing.
Invariably, we have to go back to the root cause, insecurity, solving those issues of insecurity.
It's getting interesting. Now, let's talk about the reforms. We believe that Nigerian, especially Nigerian children deserve a reform in terms of the act. Continuous reforms that will help better the life of the Nigerian children. But I don't know if you agree with me in this regard. What's your take on this, on the reforms of the Child Rights Act?
I want to know, when you talk about reforms, you mean amendments?
Okay, so let's talk about first. We know we already have the act, but then we're looking at reforms, because right now it is very visible that allegedly the Child Rights Act isn't working, allegedly. So we are looking at, can we begin to talk about reforms, conversations around reforms, probably not just an amendment, malnutrition reforms.
Yes, right.
Should we begin to talk about hawking reforms,
right.
or should look the other way? That's what I want to get
Yes, I agree with you on that. The nation needs to sit down and talk. I'm glad we have a children's parliament, but unfortunately they've not been as vocal as they used to be when I chaired the Committee on Women Affairs. And the children's parliament should speak up. Let them speak to Nigerians and say, look, on behalf of other children, I know most of them may, you know, be urban, like you said, but other children are not in the same situation, and they're in a crisis. So I believe that it's time to wake up. I think we have taken our children, we haven't had a roadmap for the children. And like I said, whatever reforms we have, it will have to include the agency. And it will also have to include the agency to enforce the rights of the child, because the agency will be responsible for sensitization of Nigerians on the issues of children. And the agencies will define what is acceptable and what is an acceptable and unacceptable way to treat a child. But most importantly, I think the local governments, where most of these children are, the state governments, and then the federal government should come together, chart a way forward for our children, for Nigerian child. Because most nations plan for their children 5 years from now. And that's why we see countries like China having the number of scientists they have. They plan their education even from when they're young. So we shouldn't even be talking about hunger, because Nigerians are one of the most intelligent people in the world. And anywhere Nigerians are outside of this country, even in parts of this country, Nigerians do very well. Even the innovations coming out of Kano and Plateau and Abia and Aba, they innovate. Lagos, I've chaired the Committee on Science and Tech. There are innovations from every part of Nigeria, but it's not enough compared to the population, because the environment in which our children find themselves is not conducive for learning. So we need to go back and say, what are we doing? What are the barriers and obstacles our children facing? and address those issues.
Well, Honorable,
Yes.
before I let you go, I want you to quickly react to this. A lot of parents will say that, hey, it's not that they are violating the right of these children by sending them to the streets to go and hawk, but the economic realities is making them to take this decision. It's not that they are trying to make their children to become domestic house helps, but because of the economic reality. Now, in a situation like this, should we be advocating for children to work in order to support their families?
Well, there are two schools of thought, but the absolute school of thought that I agree with, I absolutely support, is that during school hours, children must be in school, and children must be given time to do their homework. During school hours, children must learn, and a conducive learning environment
At the
must be
detriment
provided.
of their parents' reality.
Yes.
At the detriment of their parents' reality
Yes,
to
they
make
must-
ends meet.
They must be in school because of their future. And that future, that child you're training today, will be your investment for tomorrow. So the parents will have to work harder, and find other means, but the children must be in school.
Well, Honorable Benila, I want to say thank you so much for finding out time to be with us here on Correro.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, viewers, this is how far we can go tonight. It has been an interesting conversation with Honorable Benila. We call her the child right advocate. When it has to do with children, you can call her the mother of plenty children. But then I want to say thank you so much for also sticking with us till at this point in time. And don't forget that you can join the conversation and follow us across all our social media handle currently showing on your screen. And you can also download the Rapid TV app from your Android and iOS devices to keep track of our broadcast. My name is Godwin Sunday. I will always say, do remember that peace and unity are the pathways to progress. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye for now.